This is the Extrude button, and this is what it does. It takes a 2D sketch and makes it into a long 3D shape. You can also use it, instead of creating a shape, to cut into a shape. Or you can even take a simple 2D line and bring it into 3D, giving it a little bit of thickness. When you first press the Extrude button, you're going to notice right here at the top of the menu, you have two different options for how to do an extrude. You can do a traditional extrude, or what Fusion calls a thin extrude. For a traditional extrude, you need a closed shape. For a thin extrude, you can extrude a single line. Let's start off by talking about the traditional extrude. In almost every case, you need a sketch before you can do an extrude. If you look here at these simple shapes, you'll notice that they are filled in with blue, and then when I move my mouse over them, they turn a darker blue. That means it is a fully enclosed shape and ready for the traditional extrude. To extrude these simple shapes, I'm just going to hit Finish Sketch, come back, hit my Extrude button, and then I can just select my profiles and use this arrow to start dragging them out. Notice I can drag the arrow either way to control the direction of this extrude, and this manifests itself down here in this distance bar as either a negative or a positive value. If you are trying to hit a specific value, I generally recommend pulling the extrude in the direction you want it to go and then typing in your specific value with the correct sign. If you already have a 3D body, you can use the same extrude command to cut into that shape instead of adding additional shape. In this case, you can see that the preview is red. That indicates that I am cutting instead of adding more material. Fusion will do its best to guess if you want to add material or remove material based on context. However, you can override its assumption down here in this menu. If you would like to add more material, you can select Join. If you'd like to remove material, you can select Cut. We'll get to the other options later. To finish this cut, I'm just going to hit OK, and now I have a hole in these basic shapes here. Getting just slightly more complicated, you also have the option of preserving material only where your new extrude intersects with an existing body. This is done down here with the intersect operation. And if I hit OK here, you'll notice we have a cylinder from this direction and a cylinder from this direction, giving us this funny shape here. If you need to go back and edit an extrude, you can do that down here on the timeline by right-clicking and hitting Edit Feature. Then you have all the options that you can change however you need to. Inside this Operation tab in the Extrude menu, there are two additional options. You can create a new body or a new component. Both of these essentially do the same thing. They just put the results of your extrude in a different place inside the tree over here on the left. If you choose to extrude as a new body, you will be adding more material to your model, but the two different parts will remain distinct from each other. So if I hit OK here, you can notice that I can show and hide this new body, and I can even use the Move tool to move this around. Extruding as a new component works in a very similar manner, except now you don't even have to use the Move tool to move it around, and you can create a joint between your different parts to lock them in place. By default, the extrusion will always start wherever your base sketch is. However, sometimes it is convenient to move the starting point to somewhere else. You can change this with this menu right here that is labeled Start. By default, it is set to Profile Plane. The Profile Plane is just the plane that contains the sketch that you're using for the extrusion. But you're not limited to just using that plane. Sometimes it's convenient to keep all of your geometry in one sketch. Then you can use either a offset or a object to define where your extrude is going to start. For example, I'm going to hit Object and then click on this plane here on the opposite side as my sketch. And when I drag down this extrude, you'll notice that instead of starting from the bottom, like on this one on the left, it is starting at the top. Offset works in the exact same way, but instead of selecting a piece of geometry to define your starting point, you can just type in a value. So like in this case, we can do -0.5 and then extrude down into our part. In the next little box down, you can choose if your extrude's going to go in one direction or two directions. So by default, it only goes in one direction, the direction you move the arrow in, but you can change it to symmetric, where it'll maintain a mirror image. These two little boxes here control whether the dimension you type in is from the center plane to the face of the part, or from one face to the opposite face. Think of it as radius versus diameter. This first button is the equivalent of radius. It does it from the center plane to one side. The second button here is like diameter, where it measures from face to face. You also have the option of making it asymmetrical by choosing the option here that is just labeled two-sided. This works just like symmetric, except you have the ability to control each side independently from each other. Just like the start options let you choose where the extrusion starts, the extent type options will let you choose where it ends. The default option is distance, so you can just type in an exact number of where you want the extrusion to stop. But if you are doing a cut, you also have the option of going through everything, or you have the option of extruding to an object. When you click to object, it'll pop up this new selection menu where you can select a face or a point, and the extrusion will go to that face or point. In this case, it even maintains the cylindricalness of that cylinder when I hit OK here. If I extrude to a point, like the top point of the cylinder here, it'll not follow the cylindrical shape of the cylinder, and instead, it'll create a plane that is just tangent to the cylinder. If you don't want to quite go all the way to whatever object you've selected, you can assign an offset right here in this box. If I hit OK, you'll notice there is a little gap between the cylinder and the bottom of that extrusion. If you are designing something that is wedge-shaped, you can add a taper down here in this last box. So if I do a 5-degree taper, it'll flare out the base here. Here, we can go to 30 to make it a little bit more obvious what it's doing. Or you can type in a negative taper to taper in instead of out. The taper feature works both in join mode and also subtractive mode, cut mode. So far, we've covered everything you need to know about the traditional extrude method, but there's also this new thin extrude option. The main difference between the two is the sketch that you are using to create your extrusion. With the traditional extrude, you must choose a closed profile. So this little curly Q here does not work. However, this circle does. But with a thin extrude, I can use either one. The thin extrude basically just creates a wall instead of a solid block. Just like with the traditional extrude, you can change the direction, the start point, the end point. You can even add a taper angle. The only difference is that you get two additional options. The wall thickness, which is pretty self-explanatory. It changes the thickness of the wall. But then you also have the option of changing the wall location. And this is where the wall is relative to your sketch line. So the default is side 1. You can see that the wall is on the inside of my line. If I go to side 2, the wall will be on the outside of my line, and center, it'll be in the center. The only other quirk here is this little checkbox that is called chaining. If you have chaining on, it'll select the whole profile, but if you turn chaining off, it'll just select one line at a time. And that is absolutely everything you need to know about the Extrude button. If you'd like the ability to get one-on-one help from me, you can join my Patreon, link down in the description. For just $3 a month, you can get into the Design the Everything Discord, where I am just about always there to answer Fusion questions. And of course, if you need it from there, we can set up a video call where I can jump in and help you one-on-one. I also make physical products right there on my mill. If you'd like to buy one of those, you can find them at designtheeverything.com. I also have my main YouTube channel where I cover the business around making a physical product. If this video is helpful to you, the next video in the series is right here. You may also find that helpful.